Hello. Yes, Simwood.com. Simwood turned you as a developer into a telco. Osip.com, hosted PBX. We've been with them for years. Hopefully I'm not the only one not hearing any audio, but ZipDX.com, the full-featured, full-color conference bridge that bridges us to the world. And by our website, vuc.me on the webs, hosted by bluehost.com. And our worldwide local rate dial-ins are from voxball.com. Yes, it's amateur radio zoomed ahead 40 years to 2015, ladies and gentlemen. We've got James Bodie, we've got Andy Smith, we've got Michael Graves, we have Jim Courtney, esteemed guest. Hey, Jim.
Good afternoon, or yes, it's afternoon even here in Toronto now.
It's great to see you, Jim. I'm just gonna do one very quick announcement. No, two actually. Here we go. First one is Cranky Geek, 16th of April in London, and then anything in April? Yes, Tad Hack. I should read this first. It's 11th and 12th, and James Bodie will be there. He says, and maybe Andy. I don't know. London. Hey, and then Berlin, Germany, May 27th to 29th. I'm reading this like you are, folks. Camaillo World. I will be there. James will be there. A bunch of people will be there. I think Emil from Jitsi will be there. A bunch of people. Terrific. Finally, last but not least, Tad Hack in Portugal, in Lisbon, 13, 14 June. We're also going to be all meeting there. And here is a scoop. I don't have a graphic for this, so let me go ahead and put my camera on. Astracon, ladies and gentlemen, we can now announce that it is in, where's my drum roll? Astracon 2015 is in Orlando. Yes, Orlando, Florida, mid-October. Astracon, astracon.net. Now, the moment we've all been waiting for. Jim Courtney, a.k.a. Jim Canuck on Twitter and many other places probably. Jim, how did the first edition come about before we talk about the second edition? And we're talking about Skype, and Skype has gotten a lot of talk, a lot of chatter on Skype for the recent changes. But we're going to go back first to how your first book how the first edition happened, and then we'll be talking general Skype, and then we'll be talking present and future. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so I actually initially was involved with a VoIP software project back in 1995 when I worked at QuarterDeck. And we actually developed something called WebTalk. And I watched the engineers struggle to make this work on a 50 I got to get this right, 50 megabit Intel chip platform and 43 kilobit per second modems. And that was not trivial. But to some degree it worked. Of course, the issue was you sort of threw yourself out there and maybe somebody would contact you. No directory, none of that stuff. So we sort of fast forward to about 2002. I had a client who had developed a screen sharing program that also incorporated some, at least voice over IP technology. But then a couple of years later, I heard about this Skype, got set up using it, and I was actually using it with a client who traveled around a fair bit. And in particular, I remember one time I was at his customer's place at a medical clinic in Santa Barbara. He was in Oslo, Norway, and I could make a long-distance voice call to him over Skype, and nobody in that office even knew there had been an overseas international call made. So it sort of demonstrated the independence of over-the-top type offerings. In 2006, through various events, I got invited to join Skype Journal as a contributor. Got into following it a lot and writing for it a fair bit. Around sometime, I think 2009, 2010, I switched over to my own blog post because poor Phil, he kept on having the server go down. And once, fine, but the second time, I said, I got to have something that keeps working. And so launched voiceontheweb.biz, and I've now got, the people involved with Skype Journal said, yeah, you can copy all your Skype Journal posts over to that, so it's all there. There's something like over 900 blog posts. I tend to follow, I like to follow all the IP-based communication stuff, but obviously got very deeply into understanding Skype. In 2009, I actually was hired to help out with a developer producer of Skype hardware, some headsets and some video cams and so on. Unfortunately, as a business, it went under about 2 years later. And at that point, I realized, I've got all this understanding and knowledge of Skype, and it does no good in my head. I might as well pass it around to other people, and started writing the first edition, which took about 15 months to get to a point where I could launch it in August of 2012. Of course, as with all other technologies and offerings these days, everybody wants to do updates, as in, give me this day my daily update on whenever I go to something. And of course, over the course of 3 years, Skype has evolved. Microsoft took it over. I guess it's getting close to 3 years ago, with some commitments to actually support cross-platform, and has done some other things to improve things. Like one of the biggest is improving the video quality on mobile devices, and also improving the battery life issue significantly. But we can move into that. And then last spring, I was approached by A-Press, which is a division of Springer. And Springer is the world's largest publisher of scientific, technical, and medical books. But A-Press focuses more on new technologies. They've got lots of books about using Windows. A lot of it was written for developers, but they've started a series more for end users, and I was asked if I would like to do an update of the book. And given that they were going to take over all the marketing costs and all the production costs, even for the first book, I had to hire a formatter to get it properly formatted. They were going to take over all those costs. I said, okay, wait till August. I have a trip to Europe coming up. I have my daughter getting married, but in August we worked out a contract, and I started writing again in September, and it got published a week ago, or 10 days ago. So that's the lead up. Did we lose? Have we lost Randy?
Randy would appear to have disappeared.
Yes.
Michael.
I'm sure Michael's working on this.
No, I'll step in though and take over. For Randy seems to have disappeared for the moment. But so if that's the lead up, then and I still have that Free Talk Everyman, the headset I gifted to somebody who is still using it to this day, and the camera is still in a drawer here somewhere. It was notable for being the first little camera that had onboard compression capability.
Yeah, it had a H.264 chip in it, and actually I got heavily involved in testing the HD versions, and as a result of a presentation I did at one of the events involving the hardware vendor, Skype actually went back and redid the backend for HD video because it really wasn't working that reliably at that time, but now it works perfectly well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, in revisiting the book, I mean, I read the first book and was recommending it. That was a few years ago already. What were the kind of high watermark changes that you noticed in the interim from the first edition to the second edition? Were there some things that stand out as being especially important?
Can we switch over? Let me switch over to the PowerPoint that I have here.
Sure.
And I'll just walk through some of this. Okay, is that coming up?
It's getting there. Yep, we got it.
Okay.
So there we have it now.
There we are. Okay, so here's the background, but I've gone through that already, so I won't spend any time on it. If you want later, I can probably make this into a slide share for people. You know, why this was actually written for the first version, but it still applies. You know, Skype continues to grow and enhance, and we'll go through some of that here. It's about voice, video, chat, and collaboration. It's everywhere. It's on all sorts of devices. One of the things you find is that most of the users only click on because it's free voice or even free video, and don't realize there's a whole bunch of other stuff that enriches the conversation, which I certainly use. Talk about an osmotic migration into business. And this reminds me back in 1983-84 when the PC first came out. And I remember at one point at the what we call CIBC, the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce, one of my contacts in the business that day, at that time, said that, and he sort of was a IT consultant for them, says, you know, a VP of CIBC came into this guy's office one day and he saw this PC connected to his modem and ordered him to take the modem out. And yet it was, you know, PCs themselves got into business because of the migration from people using them at home in a large way. And the same thing has happened to Skype, is that it started out more or less as, you know, to me, it was sort of like, I always say it took off in Europe because it was so damn expensive to have a phone in Europe, let alone get one. When we lived there in '73, it took 18 months to get a phone. We were only there 15 months. I made one phone call home to Canada, and that was from my employer's phone. That was the morning my son was born, in the course of that 18 months I spent in Germany. And it was even funny, we mentioned payphones earlier. So if I wanted to make a phone call, I had to run downstairs, find a payphone, stick coins in, and hope that there was enough time in my conversation before the coins would run out, and therefore you just got clipped, cut off, end a call. So there's little awareness of the full extent of on all the tips, and certainly understanding the hardware, although there's some changes there too. So since 2012, first off, you're seeing a more consistent user interface. They focus the first page usually down on recent favorites and people. Now, people's a little different in the desktop versions for PC, and the Mac version in that it's called Contact still. But the idea of recent favorites is there as well. They've added last year video messaging. Last year they turned group video calling to become a free service. It used to be like $5 a month